Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The air hung heavy over the small town of Lindale, a quiet place where neighbors exchanged pleasantries, and the sun often carved golden paths down the street. It was a peaceful facade, yet the stillness held an undercurrent of tension, like the calm before a storm. On the surface, Lindale was a postcard of Americana, picture perfect with its tree-lined avenues and charming brick storefront. But beneath the surface lay secrets, whispers that flitted through the cracks of everyday life. The late afternoon sun dipped low over the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the town park where children played, blissfully unaware of the darker currents that churned just beyond the grasp of their lamp. A single pale blue swing creaked softly in the breeze, swaying gently as if recalling the weight of someone who had once played there. It was a typical Friday, yet there was an inexplicable tension in the air that sent warnings tinged with unease throughout the town. When dusk began to settle in, the townsfolk would gather. But tonight, a sinister feeling would ripple through Lindale like a wave crashing against a rocky shore. They would discover that dark days lay ahead. The tranquility they had come to depend upon was about to be shattered, a jigsaw puzzle missing its most crucial piece. Underneath the town's unassuming facade, darkness waited, and in a few hours, everything would change forever. The victim. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. A 15-year-old girl with dreams as expansive as the Kansas sky that arched above Lindale. With deep brown eyes and an infectious smile, she was the kind of teenager who lit up any room. Talented in art, she spent afternoons at the local coffee shop, sketching the quaint scenes of her town on napkins, the aromatic waft of espresso providing a soothing backdrop to her creativity. On that fateful Friday, Sarah had plans. She was excited to attend the annual Lindale Harvest Festival that filled the streets with hay bales and local vendors, where friends would gather and laughter mingled with the rustle of autumn leaves. To her friends, she expressed her eagerness. To her mother, she promised to be home by curfew. But as the sun began its descent and the festival lights flickered into life, she never appeared. Her absence turned from mild concern to a knot of dread as frantic calls filled the air, each unanswered ring a torment that gripped the heart tightly. Within hours, what started as a typical small-town celebration spiraled into a collective panic. As the night deepened and her family's worry morphed into fear, the town's serene facade began to crack, revealing a previously unseen darkness. What had begun as a settled evening promised to unveil horrors that none could have imagined, all centered around the absence of a girl who had touched the lives of many. The crime scene. The first call came into the Lindale Sheriff's Department just before midnight, a report of a discovery in the wooded area south of town. Patrol officers arrived swiftly, hearts pounding and minds racing with the possibility of what lay ahead. Under the muted light of the half-moon, the woods stretched darkly, twisting paths obscured by a thick veil of fog that crept through the trees like a ghost. At the edge of a small clearing, the atmosphere turned from apprehensive anticipation to stark horror. The beam of flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing something that would change the community forever. Sarah's lifeless body lay crumpled beneath a gnarled oak, the vibrant spirit of a girl robbed too soon. Her clothes, once a canvas of individuality, were now rumpled and stained, telling a story of a struggle that echoed hauntingly in the still. Officers quickly roped off the scene, their hearts heavy with an understanding that this was no ordinary case. The air, tinged with pine and damp earth, carried a suffocating weight as they began their meticulous work. With each flash of their cameras, capturing the grim details, they documented evidence under the watchful gaze of weary trees. Guardians of the horrid secret, now buried within their roots. In the distance, whispers of fear and disbelief rippled through Lindale, shattering the serene image of a town that had once been a sanctuary. It was a crime that would stay in their memories and etch itself into the very fabric of their levison, that would awaken truths best left dormant. The early investigation. In the wake of tragedy, the town of Lindale began to mobilize. Sheriff Tom Harris stood at the center of an emergency meeting that convened in the Gray Wall Town Hall, the usual hum of small-town discussions silenced by the dark shadow of recent events. With creased brows and anxious murmurs, townsfolk gathered to hear updates on the investigation into Sarah's death. The room was filled with palpable tension, a mix of grief and determination. Sheriff Harris, a man known for his steady demeanor and thorough investigative style, addressed the crowd directly. He offered condolences, but the wounds were fresh, and anger simmered beneath the surface. Neighborhood connections were being scrutinized. Each neighbor's relationship with Sarah was now fair game. Surveillance footage from local businesses and roadside cameras became the focus. A digital tracking of her last movements unraveling the night she vanished. Detectives combed through details, interviewing friends who had been with her at the festival. As names echoed off the town hall walls, the deputies took note of subtle inconsistencies in stories. Joe, a childhood friend she'd confided in, seemed overly nervous during questioning. The fidgeting of his hands spoke volumes as they darted between his pockets, the tension in the air thick enough to be sliced. Meanwhile, local media began to swarm, cameras capturing the horror that had unfolded. Headlines crackled to life, stirring up sensationalism that threatened to ignite a firestorm of outrage and fear that began to sweep through the tight-knit community. This was now everyone's fight, everyone's nightmare, and the search for justice had only just begun. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks as the investigation into Sarah Jenkins' death deepened. Yet leads remained frustratingly elusive. Sheriff Harris and his team found themselves mired in a labyrinth of false hopes and dead ends. Each tip that surfaced promising as it seemed culminated in disappointment, leaving them grappling with lingering questions and quiet despair. The once lively town square now appeared haunted, its laughter replaced with hushed conversations and sidelong glances. As they pored over the case, files late into the night, officers were confronted with an unsettling reality. The town was fracturing. Friends avoided one another, families turned in on themselves, and an unspoken fear loomed large over Lindale. Joe, the friend who had been so nervous during interrogations, became a focal point. But despite rigorous questioning, he proved an unshakable fixture within the community's alibis. Time and again, his story stayed consistent. Yet the unease in his demeanor haunted the detectives, like whispers of knowledge buried just beneath the surface. The lack of concrete evidence felt suffocating. Forensic reports trickled in slowly, revealing little that could link the crime to a suspect. Surveillance footage, while capturing Sarah walking alone, provided no clear indication of who, if anyone, had been with her, as notes piled up on the investigation board, with photographs and fragments of witness statements overlapping. Frustration mounted. With each passing day, the pressure intensified. The community wanted answers, demanding reassurance that justice would be served. But as Sheriff Harris stared at the sprawling collection of clues that led nowhere, he felt an exhausting weight, knowing that behind every question lay a family still mourning. A break in the case. Just when the investigation seemed poised to spiral into complete stagnation, a breakthrough emerged, flickering like a candle in the dark. It began with a tip-off from an unexpected source. Sarah's art teacher, Ms. Tannehill, had noted that Sarah had mentioned a disagreement with a fellow student a few days prior to her death. While innocuous on the surface, Ms. Tannehill's observation provided a glimmer of hope in a case that had started to feel chronically hopeless. The boy in question was Ryan Porter, a classmate with a reputation for being both charming and volatile. Known for his quick temper and a history of minor altercations in school, he had remained off the radar of investigators until Miss Tannehill's information brought him into the spot. With renewed vigor, Sheriff Harris directed his detectives to dig deeper into his background, examining friendships, social media activity, and anything that could illuminate the dynamics between Ryan and Sarah. As they sifted through Ryan's online presence, a series of hostile exchanges came to light. A cyberbullying episode that had unfolded in the weeks leading up to Sarah's death revealed a level of animosity that had gone unnoticed. The exchanges, filled with derogatory comments and threats that seemed harmless at first glance, added a chilling edge to what had previously been perceived as standard teenage drama. This newfound angle prompted the team to arrange a formal interview with Ryan. Tension filled the air as he arrived at the station, smug and confident, as if he felt untouchable. But with each question asked, cracks began to reveal themselves in his composed facade. Detectives got the sense that he was either hiding something monumental or was unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. For the first time since Sarah's death, shreds of a clearer narrative began to surface, igniting flickers of hope that justice might soon follow. The suspect, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting intense shades of orange and purple across the sky, Ryan Porter sat across from Sheriff Harris in the stark interrogation room. An electric tension hung in the air, as if a storm had gathered just beyond the walls, ready to unleash its fury. Ryan exuded an unsettling bravado, legs crossed and arms folded defiantly, as he eyed the detectives with an unnerving mix of arrogance and irritation. Detectives started with casual questions, trying to peel back the layers of his bravado. They asked about his weekend and how he knew Sarah, but Ryan's responses came wrapped in arrogance. He had been popular, had friends, and claimed he'd never think of harming anyone. Yet, the words hung heavy in the room, mocking with an air of insincerity. As the dialogue continued, the detectives subtly shifted gears, introducing the evidence they had gathered: the arguments, the online exchanges, and the whispers of dozens have seen them together before the festival. Ryan's veneer began to crack slightly. His eyes flickered, and an edge of defensiveness injected itself into his tone. She was just a little kid with big ideas, he scoffed. She didn't know how to take a joke. But the careful orchestration of words could not disguise the simmering resentment embedded in his responses. The detectives pressed, navigating through veils of half-truths and evasions, drawing closer to the vital threads of truth. Each time they mentioned Sarah, shifting focus from her vibrant spirit to the haunting finality of her murder, they watched him tremble inside his own bravado. While outwardly, he maintained his cool, sweat began to glisten on his brow, betraying the rise of anxiety creeping in. It was a small tell, but in that room under the bright lights, the facade was fracturing, and a distinct tension punctuated the initial bravado, signaling that uncertainty often accompanies guilt. The trial. The courtroom was a juxtaposition of somber realities, a towering structure, filled with echoes of justice that felt suffocated by the weight of grief. As family members and townsfolk filled the wooden pews, the air hung thick with anticipation and unresolved pain. Chairs creaked under the weight of expectations, each attendant an expression of vigilance, hoping to see justice served in the aftermath of tragedy. Ryan Porter's ordeal had been a cauldron of emotions, transforming from an innocent teen to a suspect whose fate now lay in the hands of the jury. Sheriff Harris, seated quietly in the front row, observed the display of far more than a legal battle. This was a community's healing process forged in public. The prosecution presented an unflinching narrative, weaving together testimony, social media exchanges, and physical evidence that linked Ryan to Sarah's last known moment. The moments were tense as witnesses took the stand, each feeling the weight of the truth while describing the darkness of the prior months leading to Sarah's death. Friends and classmates exchanged glances, many avoiding Ryan entirely. On the other side of the aisle, Ryan's defense attorney clung desperately to claims of innocence, painting Ryan as a misunderstood boy caught in a churning tide of teenage angst, a scapegoat for the fears enveloping Lindale. As the trial progressed, jurors absorbed a steady stream of emotions, the mixture of hope and despair, shared in every testimony, the agony written on Sarah's family's faces. More than once, a quiet sniffle or muffled sob disrupted the rhythm of the proceedings. Closing arguments ignited a fervor among the spectators. The prosecution's impassioned plea struck a chord, compelling the jury to remember not just the evidence, but the life that had been extinguished too soon. With decision time approaching, the town held its collective breath, bracing for a conclusion that would ripple through their lives for years to come, echoing like the haunting memory of a laughter-filled autumn festival, now shadowed by The aftermath. The verdict echoed through the courtroom, a resounding finality that seemed to momentarily suspend the air. As the jury filed out, whispers cascaded through the crowd like an ominous wave consuming the space. Ryan Porter, found guilty of murder, sat motionless, a stark contrast to the flurry of emotions swirling around him. His family remained silent, their faces betraying disbelief, while Sarah's loved ones bore expressions of both relief and lingering sorrow. In the days that followed, Lindale attempted to stitch its wounds. The small town was transformed. Once bright murals of Sarah's art adorned the local coffee shop, while a community garden took root in her honor. It was bittersweet, a gentle memorial to a life stolen too soon, yet a steadfast reminder of love prevailing amid darkness. While the judicial closure of Ryan's case could have offered refuge, the scars on the community ran deeper. Friends spoke of the unshakable change the way laughter now felt heavy, the joy of shared memories tainted by an unspoken fear that wove its way through their conversation. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. The haunting reality of violence had touched their serene lives in a way they had never expected. Sheriff Harris walked the familiar streets, his heart burdened yet burdened with hope. In time, he observed efforts of healing manifesting in small ways. Neighborhood gatherings that encouraged open dialogue. Support groups centered on loss and recovery, and the dawn of bravery within residents willing to share their story. Yet in the quiet corners of tarnished memories, the question lingered. Could a single tragedy forever alter the course of a town? And just like that, the aftershocks of Sarah's death rippled through the lives of Lindale's residents unforgettable, and a poignant reminder of the past while they fought to reclaim their future. Reflection. Time, while indifferent to the heartaches of those it envelops, bears witness as scars fade, yet memories remain vivid. Sheriff Harris stood at the edge of the town park one cool autumn evening, the leaves swirling like whispers of those lost. The laughter of children echoed in the background, a comforting reminder of resilience even as shadows clung to corners of memory. He breathed in the crisp air, reflecting on the lessons woven into the fabric of their shared trials. As he looked at the murals of Sarah's vibrant art kaleidoscope of colors against the brick wall, she noted how the community had transformed tragedy into a testament of strength. This metamorphosis came not without its challenges, but the residents had birthed something profound. Solidarity and sorrow. An unspoken commitment to honor Sarah's life. By nurturing empathy and compassion among themselves, they gathered now not just as townspeople, but as a family, bonded by shared grief and an understanding of loss. In the stillness of that moment, he understood the true impact of Sarah's story. It wasn't solely about what she lost or how her life concluded, but about how her memory inspired connections that would fortify Lindale against whatever darkness loomed on the horizon.